The night of the humiliation, I adjusted my tie one final time before leaving. It was a simple Windsor knot, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, just like me. "Are you ready yet, James?" "We're already late, and you know how Celeste gets when you make her wait." Judith, my mother-in-law, stood in the doorway of our guest bedroom, which had become my permanent sleeping quarters over the past year. Her voice carried that familiar blend of condescension and impatience that I'd grown accustomed to over 5 years of marriage to her daughter. I nodded silently, slipping my watch onto my wrist, a modest Timex that had survived a decade of corporate battles, unlike the gaudy Rolex that adorned Celeste's delicate wrist. A gift from me that she claimed was from an admirer in Stockholm. "I don't know why you even bother coming to these things," Judith continued, not waiting for a response. "It's not like anyone asks about you. Nobody cares what Celeste's husband does while she's changing the world." I smiled. "Someone has to drive you both home when you're drunk on free champagne." She didn't laugh. Judith Harmon never laughed at my jokes. To her, I was the ultimate disappointment, the accounting major who somehow tricked her brilliant daughter into marriage, the glorified assistant, the nobody, if only they knew. The gala was being held at the Baxter Convention Center, a glass monstrosity I'd quietly purchased through a shell corporation 3 years earlier. Not that Celeste or Judith knew this. They simply assumed it was another venue eager to host the great Dr. Celeste Whitmore, environmental savior, tech visionary, and media darling. We arrived fashionably late, of course. Celeste insisted on it. "Important people are never punctual, James. That's what assistants and husbands are for." I helped her from the car, careful not to wrinkle her emerald gown, a $14,000 creation that would be photographed, discussed, and dissected in a dozen magazines by morning. She didn't thank me, merely assessed her reflection in the window before proceeding. Judith followed, her eyes already scanning the guest list for potential social climbing opportunities. "There's Senator Wilson. Celeste, make sure you speak with him tonight. His climate committee is voting next month." "I know, Mother." Celeste flashed her practiced smile, the one that had graced magazine covers and captivated boardrooms. It never reached her eyes. Not anymore. I followed several paces behind, the dutiful shadow, the invisible architect. The grand hall erupted in applause when Celeste entered. Cameras flashed, hands reached out to touch the hem of greatness. I stood back, watching, cataloging each face, each sycophant. These were the same people who would scatter like cockroaches when the lights came on tomorrow. A waiter offered me champagne. I declined. Tonight required absolute clarity. "James, how's life as arm candy?" It was Marcus Ridley, CEO of Verdant Futures, one of our biggest competitors. He always made the same joke at these functions, thinking himself both clever and intimidating. "Quieter than yours, I imagine," I replied. The same answer I always gave. Predictable, forgettable. He laughed too loudly. "Your wife's keynote is the talk of the tech world. Everyone's expecting big announcements tonight. Any hints for an old friend?" I shrugged. "I just handle the paperwork, Marcus. You know that." Another laugh, another dismissal, another person who never bothered to look beneath the surface. Perfect. The evening progressed as these things always did. Celeste worked the room, a queen among admirers. Judith whispered in ears, planting seeds of influence. I circulated quietly, smiling, nodding, collecting information like a ghost in plain sight. At precisely 9:30 p.m., the program began. A series of speakers praised Celeste's vision, her courage, her brilliance. A video montage highlighted the technological innovations that had made her famous. The neural networked solar array, the carbon-negative manufacturing process, the biodegradable battery cells, my innovations, my research, my life's work. When Celeste took the stage, the applause was deafening. She basked in it, arms outstretched like a televangelist receiving divine validation. I checked my watch. 30 minutes until the end of everything she thought she knew. 10 years ago, I had a vision, she began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd rehearsed with vocal coaches. A vision of a world where technology and nature existed in perfect harmony. Everyone told me it was impossible. I smiled at the lie. I had never told her it was impossible. I had shown her exactly how to make it possible, with detailed schematics she barely understood. But impossible is just a word used by small minds to describe what visionaries see clearly, she continued, reciting the line I'd written for her 3 years ago. And tonight, as we celebrate a decade of breakthrough innovation, I stand before you not just as a scientist or a CEO, but as living proof that determination can change the world. The crowd ate it up. They always did. However, she paused dramatically, her eyes finding mine in the crowd for the first time that evening. There was something cold in them, something I should have seen coming. Every journey reaches crossroads, moments where we must shed dead weight to reach new heights. The room fell silent. This wasn't in the prepared remarks. Which is why tonight I'm announcing not just a new direction for our company, but for my personal life as well. She smiled, but it was the smile of a predator. I'm filing for divorce. James, you're a good man. But let's be honest. You've become dead weight. A visionary woman doesn't need a babysitter. The crowd gasped, then laughed. Nervous at first, then more confidently when they saw Celeste wasn't joking. I felt hundreds of eyes turn toward me, waiting for the reaction, the scene, the drama. Judith raised her champagne flute in a silent toast, her eyes gleaming with vindictive triumph. I simply adjusted my tie, nodded once to Celeste, and walked calmly toward the exit. Behind me, I heard her continue. Now, as we look to the future. She had no idea what future awaited her. But I did. I'd designed it with the same meticulous attention to detail that I'd put into every patent she'd claimed as her own. Outside, the night air felt clean against my face. I loosened my tie and checked my watch again. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd scripted it myself. In fact, I had. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message, execute. Then I smiled. I didn't go home that night. There was no point. It wasn't my home anymore. It never had been. Just a showcase for Celeste's ego, filled with awards she hadn't earned and artwork she didn't understand. Instead, I drove to a modest apartment building across town, used a key card that didn't bear my name, and entered a space that no one, not Celeste, not Judith, not a single person at that gala, knew existed. My real office, my real life. The walls were lined with monitors showing every aspect of Celeste's empire. Stock values, production metrics, security feeds from the main headquarters. In the center stood a desk with 3 phones, each representing a different shell company that secretly controlled majority interests in what the world called Celeste Whitmore Enterprises. I removed my jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and made myself a cup of coffee. It would be a long night, but I'd been preparing for it for 3 years. The first call came at 3:17 a.m. Celeste. I let it go to voicemail. James, where the hell are you? My cards aren't working. None of them. And the house alarm system won't recognize my fingerprints. If this is some childish reaction to tonight, grow up and fix it immediately. The second call came at 4:22 a.m. Judith. Listen to me, you insignificant little man. Whatever tantrum you're throwing needs to end now. Celeste has a breakfast interview with Bloomberg at 7, and this is completely unacceptable. Fix the accounts, or we'll make sure everyone knows what a vindictive, pathetic... I deleted the rest without listening. Their panic was right on schedule. At precisely 5:30 a.m., I placed my first call to Bernard Klein, chairman of the board at Whitmore Enterprises. He answered on the first ring. He'd been waiting. "It's time," I said simply. "The documents are prepared as you instructed," he replied. "The board meeting is scheduled for 8 a.m. She won't know what hit her." "She already doesn't," I said, and ended the call. Next, I activated the protocol I'd coded 3 years earlier, a digital lockdown that would systematically revoke Celeste's access to every system, account, and property that bore her name. Not that most of them actually belonged to her. That was her first mistake, never reading what she signed. By 6 a.m., I was showered, dressed in my best suit, and heading to what everyone else still called Celeste Whitmore Tower. Security had been briefed. Legal was standing by. The trap was set. I arrived before her, of course, took the private elevator to the top floor, her floor, and sat in her chair. Her office was a monument to vanity, wall-to-wall awards, magazine covers featuring her face, and a stunning view of the city she thought she owned. At 7:35 a.m., the security desk called up. "Sir, Doctor, Whitmore and Mrs. Harmon are here. They're quite insistent about coming up." "Issue them visitor badges only," I instructed, "and have Phillips from legal meet them at the elevator." I swiveled in the chair to face the door and waited. The shouting started before they even reached the office. "This is absolutely outrageous," Judith's voice carried down the hallway. "Do you have any idea who we are?" "Mrs. Harmon, please lower your voice," came Phillips's steady response. "Building security has protocols." The door burst open. Celeste stood there, still in last night's gown, makeup smeared from what I assumed was a mix of rage and disbelief. Judith flanked her, face contorted in fury. Phillips stood behind them, stone-faced and professional. "What the hell is this, James?" Celeste demanded, stalking into the office. She stopped short when she saw me in her chair. "Get out of my seat. Whatever point you're trying to make—" "Please have a seat, Celeste. You too, Judith." I gestured to the visitors' chairs across from the desk. "We have much to discuss before the board meeting." "Board meeting? What board meeting?" Celeste looked genuinely confused. Another one of her problems. She never bothered learning how her own company operated. Too busy being a visionary. "The emergency session called to address your removal," I said calmly, sliding a folder across the desk. "You might want to review these documents before it begins." Celeste snatched the folder, flipped it open, and began scanning. Her face drained of color. "This can't be legal. These are forged." She looked up, eyes wild. "You forged my signature?" I shook my head. "Page 6, paragraph 3. That's the power of attorney you signed 3 years ago. Remember? You said you were too busy for paperwork and just wanted it handled." "That was for tax purposes," she hissed. "No," I corrected gently. "That's what you assumed it was for. You never actually read it. Just like you never read the corporate bylaws, the patent applications, or the ownership structures of the holding companies." Judith grabbed the papers, her hands shaking with rage. "This is absurd. You can't possibly think this will stand up in court. Celeste is the face of this company. She's the genius behind everything." I laughed then, a genuine free sound I hadn't allowed myself in years. "Is she? Let's test that theory." I turned to Celeste. "Explain to me how the neural network in the solar array interfaces with the carbon sequestration matrix, not the PR version, the actual technical specifications." Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for a teleprompter. That's not... Or perhaps you could walk me through the chemical process that makes our battery cells biodegradable without compromising structural integrity. Silence. No? How about the simplest question? What programming language did we use to code the efficiency algorithms? More silence. Then defiance. I don't need to justify myself to you. I'm the visionary. I direct teams. Teams that report to me, I said quietly. Teams that have documented every instruction, every meeting, every instance where you took credit for work you didn't understand. I tapped another folder on the desk. 5 years of evidence, Celeste. 5 years of your fraud. The color returned to her face, deep, furious red. You planned this. All of this. For how long? Since the night I overheard you and that venture capitalist in Aspen. The night you called me your glorified secretary and laughed about how I had no idea what I was signing away. I leaned forward. I may be boring, Celeste, but I'm not stupid. The intercom buzzed. Sir, the board is assembled in the main conference room. Thank you. We'll be right there. I stood, buttoning my jacket. After you, ladies. Judith recovered first, her socialite training kicking in. You listen to me, James. You're nothing. Nobody. Celeste made you. No, I said, my voice hardening for the first time. I made her, and now I'm unmaking her. The board meeting lasted exactly 27 minutes. Each board member had been briefed individually over the past month. Each had seen the evidence. Each understood their fiduciary duty to the shareholders. Celeste and Judith weren't prepared. They had no counter-evidence, no legal standing, no allies in the room. By 8:27 a.m., the vote was unanimous. Celeste Whitmore was removed from all positions within the company, effective immediately. This isn't over, she seethed as security escorted them from the building, her access cards confiscated, her personal items boxed up by assistants who couldn't meet her eyes. I'll fight this. With what resources? I asked quietly, so only she could hear. Check your accounts, Celeste. All of them. The flash of terror in her eyes told me she finally understood the depth of what was happening. By noon, the press release went out. Following a thorough internal review, Dr. Celeste Whitmore has been removed from all positions due to misrepresentation of authorship and executive misconduct. James Whitmore will assume full control effective immediately. The company will be rebranded as Whitmore Sustainable Technologies to reflect its authentic leadership. By 1 p.m., the stock had dipped briefly, then rallied to new heights as I conducted a calm, fact-based interview with the Wall Street Journal. By 3 p.m., Celeste's lawyer called to discuss terms. I had him placed on the permanent block list. There would be no terms, no negotiation, no mercy, just as there had been none for me. The following weeks unfolded exactly as I'd planned. Methodical, precise, complete. Celeste tried to fight back, of course. She hired lawyers, 3 firms in succession, each dropping her when they discovered her accounts were frozen and her assets encumbered by debt she didn't know existed. I received daily reports of her desperate maneuvers. She attempted to access our vacation property in Aspen, only to learn it was owned by one of my shell companies. She tried to sell her jewelry, only to discover most pieces were corporate assets, not personal gifts. She even attempted to leverage her fame into consulting positions, only to be met with closed doors as rumors of fraud and corporate espionage spread through the industry. I never spoke to her directly, never responded to her increasingly frantic messages. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the company under its true identity. I gave interviews explaining the technology in detail, something Celeste had never been able to do. I met with engineers and scientists who finally felt free to speak about their contributions. I unraveled the carefully constructed myth of the brilliant doctor, Whitmore, and replaced it with the complex reality of collaborative innovation. The truth was both more mundane and more remarkable than the fiction we'd been selling. 1 month after the gala, I received an unexpected visitor at my office, Thomas Reed, Celeste's personal trainer, and, as my surveillance had confirmed long ago, her lover. Mr. Whitmore, he began nervously, standing awkwardly in my doorway. I was hoping we could talk. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. About what exactly? He sat, eyes darting around the office that no longer contained a single photograph of Celeste. I think there's been a misunderstanding. the condo, the car. Those were gifts. From Celeste. Were they? I opened a drawer and removed a file. According to these documents, the condo at 1752 Lakeshore Drive was purchased using funds from account number 87690432, a corporate expense account for research and development. The Range Rover was leased under the company fleet program. I closed the file. That's embezzlement, Mr. Reed. His face paled. I didn't know. She told me they were hers to give. Many things Celeste claimed were hers weren't, I replied evenly. You have two options. Vacate the property and surrender the vehicle within 48 hours or face criminal charges alongside her. He was gone within 20 minutes. And according to my sources, he blocked Celeste's number the same day. Another loose end tied neatly. 3 months after the gala, I received the news I'd been waiting for. Judith Harmon had been forced to sell her lavish penthouse to cover mounting legal fees and tax obligations. It seemed that the consulting company she'd established years ago, ostensibly to advise Celeste's business, had been improperly reporting income. An anonymous tip to the IRS had triggered an audit that uncovered years of questionable deductions and unreported gifts. I had the real estate agent send me photographs of the empty penthouse before it sold. The space that had once hosted elaborate dinner parties where Judith belittled me now stood barren, its emptiness a reflection of her new reality. The final photograph showed a small moving truck parked outside a dilapidated Victorian house in a forgotten corner of the city, Judith's childhood home, which she'd inherited but never visited. The only property untouched by creditors because it held no value worth seizing. I had the photograph framed and placed it on my desk. A reminder. 6 months after the gala, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. The National Association of Women in Technology was hosting their annual awards dinner, an event where Celeste had been honored 3 years running. The invitation requested my presence as keynote speaker, replacing Dr. Celeste Whitmore, whose credentials were under review. I accepted, of course. The night of the event, I wore my best suit, nothing flashy, just impeccably tailored, and delivered a speech about integrity, collaboration, and giving proper credit. I announced a new scholarship program for female engineers, named after my grandmother, who had worked as a computer programmer in the 1960s without recognition. I never mentioned Celeste. I didn't need to. Her absence spoke volumes. After the speech, a young engineer approached me, tablet in hand. Mr. Whitmore, I've been studying your battery cell design. The ionic transfer mechanism is revolutionary, but I think there's a way to improve the degradation timeline by adjusting the polymer matrix. I smiled genuinely. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's talk. That night, I hired her on the spot, the first of many brilliant minds who would join the company, now that merit, not marriage to the boss, determined advancement. 1 year after the gala, I finally decided it was time for closure. Not for Celeste's sake, but for my own. I had my driver take me to the Victorian house where Celeste and Judith now lived. From my reports, I knew the utilities were barely functioning, the roof leaked, and the neighborhood had long ago surrendered to decay. I didn't get out of the car, simply observed from the tinted windows as Judith struggled up the cracked walkway with grocery bags. Designer clothes replaced by discount store basics, salon-perfect hair now gray and unkempt. Celeste appeared in the doorway to help her mother. Her face, once carefully maintained by the best dermatologists, now showed the strain of stress and financial ruin. The woman who couldn't pass a mirror without checking her reflection now moved like someone trying to remain invisible. They didn't notice the car, didn't notice me. They were too focused on survival to pay attention to who might be watching. I instructed my driver to pull away. There was nothing more to see. Back at my apartment, my real home, modest but comfortable, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in silence. Not celebrating exactly, just acknowledging the completion of a task I'd set for myself years ago. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant. Flowers delivered as instructed. Right on schedule. Celeste would receive them by now, a dozen white lilies, her favorite, with a card that read simply, "To the star and her spotlight. May the darkness be just as illuminating." She would understand the message. She would know they were from me, and she would realize, perhaps for the first time, that her greatest mistake wasn't the humiliation at the gala or the affairs, or even the years of taking credit for my work. Her greatest mistake was assuming that quiet meant weak, that methodical meant passive, that patience meant acceptance. I took another sip of whiskey, watching the city lights below. My city now. My legacy. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as architectural correction, removing unstable elements to reveal the sound structure beneath. I never raised my voice, never made a scene, never acted out of pure emotion the way Celeste would have. I simply redesigned her reality, one legal document at a time. And in the end, I discovered something important. There is power in being underestimated. There is freedom in being invisible. There is satisfaction in knowing that the mighty can fall not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet click of a pen on paper. I finished my whiskey and smiled. The boring man had won, after all. 2 years after the gala, I rarely thought about Celeste anymore. She had become a cautionary tale in business circles, mentioned occasionally in articles about corporate fraud or in business school ethics courses. The woman who had once been everywhere was nowhere now. I heard she'd found work as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm, the ultimate irony for someone who had once mocked paper pushers like me. Judith had suffered a minor stroke, adding medical bills to their mounting debts. Their names had disappeared from guest lists. Their calls went unreturned, their existence barely registered in a world that had once revolved around them. Meanwhile, Whitmore Sustainable Technologies thrived. Our stock had tripled. Our innovations now powered cities around the world. Our corporate culture, built on transparency, collaboration, and recognition of all contributors, had made us an employer of choice for the brightest minds in the industry. I still kept regular hours, still wore sensible suits, still spoke quietly in meetings, but now people leaned in to listen. On the second anniversary of what the media had dubbed the Whitmore revelation, I received an unusual email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "Why?" The body contained just 2 sentences. "You could have exposed me at any time. Why wait for me to destroy myself first?" I knew immediately who it was from. The question had merit. I could have revealed the truth years earlier, could have claimed credit for my work from the beginning. Why the elaborate scheme? Why the patient wait? I considered not responding. There was no obligation, no benefit to engaging. But after a moment's contemplation, I decided she deserved an answer. One final lesson from the man she'd never bothered to understand. My reply was brief. Because you never would have believed it otherwise. Your failure needed to be your own creation, just like your success was mine. I hit send, then blocked the address. That night, I hosted a dinner for my executive team at my home, still the modest apartment I'd kept secret during my marriage. We celebrated new patents, new partnerships, new possibilities. We talked about the future, not the past. As the evening wound down, my new CFO, Lisa Chen, a brilliant woman who had worked in Celeste's shadow for years, asked the question I knew had been on everyone's mind. "Do you ever miss it, James? The quiet role, being the power behind the throne?" I considered her question carefully, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "No," I said finally. "There's a difference between being silent by choice and being silenced. I chose silence once because it served a purpose. Now I choose to speak because that serves a greater one." Later, after everyone had gone, I stood on my balcony looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a crumbling Victorian house, Celeste was probably still staring at my email, searching for hidden meanings, ulterior motives, elaborate schemes. She would never understand that the truth was simpler. I had built an empire with my mind while she built a facade with her image. When the moment came to choose between them, reality won. It always does. I finished my whiskey and went inside. Tomorrow would be busy. We were breaking ground on a new research facility, one that would bear my name openly, honestly. One that would stand as a testament not to ego or illusion, but to patient, methodical creation. After all, that's what real architects do. We don't seek applause. We build things that last. And sometimes, when necessary, we tear down what's broken to make room for what's true. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.